Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this review we will comparing two lenses with different focal types. The Sony FE 70-200mm f4G and the Tamron 28-200mm f2.8 till 5.6. Both lenses are very popular, although both covers different areas of photography. The Sony is a zoom lens that is used more for portraits, and the Tamron is a travel super zoom lens that is known more for as an all-rounder. In this review we will take a look how similar the two lenses are and if the Tamron can eventually replace the Sony. First, we will take a look at the main features and differences of these two lenses before getting into the side-by-side image comparison. The first difference is of course the focal range. The Sony covers a focal range of 70-200mm and the Tamron of 28-200mm. The Sony was released in October 2013 and the Tamron on June 2020. As you see, the Tamron lens is 7 years younger than the Sony. The next difference is the aperture. The Sony has a constant aperture of f4, while the Tamron has an aperture from f2.8 till 5.6. Tamron has a better aperture till 55mm and it's equal until 78mm. The Sony has a better aperture from 79mm, but do we have so big difference at 200mm with an f4 on the Sony and an f5.6 on the Tamron? We will find out in a minute. The next part is the filter thread. The Sony has a filter thread of 72mm, while the Tamron has a filter thread of 67mm. The weight of a lens is as important as its external dimensions, especially if you are planning to handhold your camera and lens combination for longer periods. The Tamron weighs 576 grams and it's 274 grams lighter than the Sony with a weight of 840 grams. The size of a lens is also an important deciding factor. Sony is the longer of the two lenses with 175mm. The Tamron with a length of 117mm is 58mm shorter. Besides being longer, the Sony has a larger diameter of 18mm compared to the Tamron 74mm diameter. The Sony lens has lots of switches and a focus hold button, while the Tamron has only a lock switch and no focus hold button. The next important thing is the price. The Sony lens has still a price tag of €1,100 and the Tamron lens of only €700. But now let's go into the side-by-side image comparison of both lenses. Have fun! Okay, the first shot is only to show you the difference between 28 to 70mm. You see here on the left side the Tamron with a focal length of 28mm, f2.8, and the 70mm Sony with an aperture of f4, just to show you how big the difference is between these two focal length ranges. Now we see here also on the left side the Tamron 70mm with an aperture of f4. Both pictures looks good on the first look, but let's zoom in on 100% on the middle. Let's reframe it a little bit. So, and both are very sharp in the middle. I don't see so much difference. No, equally sharp. Let's go to the edges. And here exactly the same sharpness. I can't see any difference. Let's go to the right side here. And here again. Oh, maybe the Tamron is a little bit sharper here, but only a little bit. But at 70mm the sharpness is equal on both lenses. Let's compare 135mm. I've used on the Tamron here the aperture of f5 and on the Sony an aperture of f4. My idea between these comparison here is to test the lens always with the aperture wide open, because this is the weakest point in sharpness of both lenses. On the first look, both looks identical. I can't see difference here, but let's zoom in. Let's reframe it a little bit. And here in the middle, I think the Tamron is sharper. Yes, but only a little bit. Let's go to the edges. And on the left edge, the Sony is a little bit sharper. Let's go down. Here again, the Sony is a but only a little bit sharper. Let's go on the right side. Here, I think both are equal. And on the right side above, I think here again. No, I can't see so much difference here. No difference. Maybe the Sony on the edge is a little bit sharper on 135mm, but in the middle is the Tamron a little bit sharper, but the sharpness is more or less identical. Okay, let's go on 200mm. I've used here an aperture on the Tamron of 5.6 and f4 on the Sony lens. And on the first look, there is no so much difference here. Let's zoom in. And the sharpness, again, very similar. I don't see a difference here. Let's go to the edges. Okay, maybe this Sony here on the right edge is a bit sharper. Yeah, on the edge, on 200mm, this Sony is sharper. What about the left side? Okay, here the Tamron performs a little bit better, but here again the Sony, it's a bit sharper, but only a little bit on the edges. If you go now to the right side here, you see the sharpness is identical. Okay, very good performance. But what about portrait shots? Okay, here you see portrait shots of both lenses. I've used the aperture of 5.6 and a focal length of 200 on the Tamron, and on the Sony lens also a focal length of 200 with an f4. And what you see directly, the bokeh bubbles here on the Sony lens are a little bit rounder and it looks a little bit nicer. But let's zoom in. But what about the sharpness? And of course the focus point was always this eye here. And here in the middle, it seems that the Tamron lens is sharper. Yes, you see it here. The Tamron lens is sharper. But what about the bokeh balls? Let's set it here to 50%. Okay, on the Tamron lens you see a few onion rings, but also on the Sony lens, but not so strong like on the Tamron lens. But if you compare these two images here, both looks good. And what about the ISO performance? Here you see an ISO on the Tamron lens of 1600 with f5.6 and on the Sony lens 1000 with an f4. This is the difference between these two lenses and the aperture between f5.6 and f4. Here you see another portrait shot from my cat, and you see the difference in the bokeh is not so big. Here on the Sony again, I've shot this picture here with the f4 and on the Tamron lens with an f5.6. And both pictures looks more or less identical. If you zoom in to the eye, both are extremely sharp. And as you see here, the Tamron lens does here also a good job if you want to shoot portrait shots. But now I will show you how versatile the Tamron lens is. This picture here I have shot also with the Tamron lens. Here you see it, the 28 to 200mm, f2.8 till 5.6. I've used here a focal length of 91mm for 30 seconds and an aperture of f4.5. And you see you can use this lens also for astrophotography. And I think it's not so bad, this picture here, isn't it? And what about the autofocus performance? This picture here I've shot on the Nürburgring here in Germany, and this car here had a speed over 200 km per hour, and you see how good it works. And nearly every picture was on point with the Tamron lens. Here another lowlight performance. I've used here the aperture of f2.8 and 28mm, and you see with this lens you can shoot also very good lowlight shots. And here another example, close-up shots with the Tamron. I've used here also the f2.8 aperture and the focal length range of 28mm, and you see this has a very smooth bokeh here. Okay, now we will come to a short autofocus test and then we'll see us to the conclusion. Welcome back. As you probably saw in the test, there are lots of arguments to choose any of both lenses. But for me, the Tamron is a better choice, and I will tell you why. The Sony has a better aperture, and the upper focal length is stabilized, it has different switches, and it's only a bit sharper in a few focal lengths. On the other hand, the Tamron is smaller, lighter, 7 years younger, also sharp, 400 € cheaper, and is more versatile. You can shoot almost everything with the Tamron: landscape, portraits, street and even astro, as you have just seen a minute ago. I was faced with a difficult decision, because I have always enjoyed shooting with the Sony 70-200mm. But since I own the Tamron, I didn't use the Sony anymore, and in the end of the day, I sold it. I liked using the Sony lens for portraits in the past, but the Tamron does a good job here too. Otherwise, I have also the Sony 85mm f1.8 for portraits. Don't get me wrong, the Sony 17-200mm still has its advantages and is still a good lens today, but these were my experiences over the last few months. And however, I also think that the Sony has become a bit old, and if you absolutely want a 70-200 focal length, you might be better buying the Tamron 70-280mm f2.8, as it's cheaper and faster. I hope this comparison helped you with your buying decision, and if you like this test, I would be happy if you can give a like and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions, please write it in the comments down below. I will try to answer everyone. See you next time.